is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Catachrist Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.catachrist.com. And our special guest today is, once again, my good friend Mike Floros from the band Steel City. And Mike is a guitar player and founding member. Now, yeah, we're interviewing Mike for our On the Record segment, which is what we usually call this. But today, because Mike had such a fun, genius idea, we're going to call it On the Kiss Records, because Mike, being a Kiss fan, he wanted to talk about several Kiss albums, and specifically, I guess we will start with, we're going to talk about Rock and Roll Over, Creatures of the Night, Lick It Up, and Revenge. Now, I noticed right off the bat, Mike, the last three albums there, they have one thing in common besides being Kiss albums. They all feature Vinnie Vincent. We'll get into that later, but let's start with Rock and Roll Over. So, since I guess that was the first album that kind of you really got into, am I correct?
It wasn't the first album that got me into Kiss. And by the way, thanks, Jason, for having me on. This is really a privilege, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, you're a Kiss fan like me, so we got that in common.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Kiss was, before I, became a Kiss fan, really my only foray into, I guess, the rock and roll world was Elvis Presley and David Cassidy. My first concerts were David Cassidy in 1974, and then my next concert was actually... my next concert in 1977 was actually Elvis Presley.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got to see the King before he died. And then after that, I got to see my favorite band. I had fourth row seats. I went with my cousin Laura, and we went to see Kiss at the Hollywood Sportatorium in Hollywood, Florida. And it was just amazing. I've been a fan since I was like I said, a little kid. And of all their 70s albums, I have to say, for me, Rock and Roll Over was the most complete. For me, when I listen to a Kiss album, one of the things that really kind of stands out to me about all of the albums that we have that we're going to chat about today is that the Gene Simmons songs are just as good as the Paul Stanley songs. And that to me is big, because Gene's songs sometimes take a little bit of a kind of a certain appeal. And I'm not trying to rip on Gene by any stretch, but it's just they're vastly different than the Paul songs, and Paul's more melodic and Gene's more hardcore.
It's kind of funny you say that, because I don't know what it was, but I myself, as a Kiss fan, I was always drawn more towards the Gene stuff myself. I don't know if it's the fire breathing, the blood, the demon, or just kind of everything, but I always thought he was a great singer, and he never really got his dues for that, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I think Gene's a fantastic singer, and I think he's a standout. And it's the reason why he and Paul had, aside from the fact that they were founders, they really had the lion's share of the vocals, is because he really is a good singer. Paul is just the more melodic, the higher pitched, guy, has, a little bit better range.
Yeah.
I get a little bit more range. And so people are probably drawn to that because it's more of the classic rock and roll singer vibe.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you say that Rock and Roll Over is kind of, maybe one of your all-time favorite Kiss albums, because it is very much a really great, decent album. A lot of people point to that album. You would not be surprised in doing this On the Record segment how many people who have chosen Rock and Roll Over to talk to me about. You've got to be like the maybe third or fourth guy, and each person I've interviewed loves it for a different reason. But it's kind of interesting. Destroyer was the album that came before. When a lot of people think of Kiss, they will point to that album. It has a lot of the hits, a lot of the songs that are still in the set list. It had the big power ballad Beth and all that. But what was it about you that you liked a little more about Rock and Roll Over? Did you feel it was not maybe as polished? Not as
to me, listening to it, I mean, when the opening line of "I Want You," it just starts out a little bit different. I mean, I think Detroit Rock City, like I said, is probably one of the greatest Kiss songs of all time. But just from the opening salvo of "I Want You" straight through to "Take Me," to me, it's like that was like one of the best 1-2 punches I think I've ever heard on an album in my life.
Oh yeah,
and it just, to me, it's just a fantastic song. The songwriting on it is top shelf. I mean, and then you think about it, you go straight from "I Want You" to "Take Me" and "Calling Dr. Love," and it's like, wow. I mean, when have you really ever heard like three songs just punch you in the gut like that? And with all due respect to Destroyer, which I think is a great album, this album just seems to me it was a little bit heavier.
Yeah.
and it had just a little bit more of that guttural Kiss vibe that they kind of came out swinging with in 1974.
Yeah, I would only dare say Rock and Roll Over is polished in the sense that, like, compared to Destroyer, I say Destroyer is much more slick and polished and more commercial, but Rock and Roll Over, like you said, had a great kind of raw sound, almost a little like what was on the debut album. The debut album would say, I mean, that was really kind of really raw and fresh. You could hear the hunger in the band, but Rock and Roll Over, it kind of went back to the old Kiss style, if you will, that wasn't as slick and as polished as Destroyer.
And you know, the really unique thing about it is, to me, this is my favorite. It's my favorite '70s Kiss album. Destroyer isn't even my second favorite '70s Kiss album. I'd probably put Dress to Kill above Destroyer. I probably would put the debut before Destroyer.
Oh yeah.
Destroyer is probably like my fourth or fifth favorite of the '70s albums. It's a good album.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic album, but I know, like, Kiss always points to it as like, oh, this is going to be our next Destroyer. And to me, I listen to Kiss and I'm like that. You know, I'm always waiting for them to come out with their next Rock and Roll Over.
Oh yeah, wow. And you know, Destroyer, I got to bring up only because, you know, bringing up about Gene and what a great singer he is and everything. And Bob Ezrin, though, he had a real eye and ear for music, and as a producer, I mean, he produced all those great Alice Cooper albums. I bring that up only because, in talking about Rock and Roll Over, because of the fact that, I don't know if there are a lot of people that are aware of this or not, but God of Thunder, which is thought of as a Gene Simmons song, that was actually a Paul Stanley tune. And it was Bob Ezrin that kind of said, you know, Paul, that sounds more like a Gene tune, so we're going to have him sing it. And oddly enough, because of the Paul Stanley song, Gene Simmons became known as the God of Thunder.
Yeah, that actually is really cool. I honestly, the first time I've heard that is today, and if I did hear before, I clearly had forgotten.
Well, I will tell you, if you want to check it out, just how accurate and true it is, you can go on YouTube. It was actually, if you got the Kiss box set, it's on there too. But go on YouTube and just type in like, Paul Stanley God of Thunder, and you will, and on there again, which was originally on the box set, you will hear Paul Stanley doing the lead vocal, which is a demo version, and it's just kind of interesting to hear what the original take was.
You know, it's really, the thing is you got to really give Bob Ezrin credit for that then, because it truly does fit. That song truly fits Gene Simmons' persona much more than it does Paul Stanley's. And it's a great song. It has that Gene Simmons vibe to it. It's in no way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm not trying to. No. Again, if I heard Paul Stanley singing that song, I don't think it would have become the classic Kiss song that it is with Gene singing it. Yeah,
and it's really just amazing to know that it's a song, because many people, and even I'm guilty of this, until I actually looked at the songwriting credit, I've always thought of it as a Gene tune, and then come to find out, Paul Stanley wrote the tune, and maybe not even with Gene in mind, or maybe he subconsciously wrote it about Gene, who knows, but it's just amazing that somebody like the producer can pick up on that and say, you know what, I think Gene would be better, and it became his song in a way, even though he didn't write it.
Well, ultimately, that's the job of a producer, is to be able to find those things, to be able to find those needles in the haystack, or to be able to just shift focus and shift a train of thought into something that will actually end up being better for the band. Yeah. A mix engineer is really responsible for creating really good sounds, getting authentic tones, and just making the record sound good. A producer is really there to help you with the arranging and to bring it all together and tie a nice big fat bow on it.
Yeah,
kudos to Ezra for having the foresight to see that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and getting back to Rock and Roll Over, I'll tell you, one of the songs that I think that kind of got buried on that album is See You in Your Dreams, which, interestingly enough, Gene Simmons, like 2 years later, would redo it on his solo album. I was curious, of the two versions, which do you prefer and why?
I haven't listened to the Gene album, and I actually did listen to it probably about a month, maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, somewhere around there. But I think I probably would always like the Rock and Roll Over version a little bit more, simply because it's the version that I became so familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even though I was still a kid when the 78 version came out, it was just the original version, and to me it sounds great. I love the guitar solo that's on it. It just, overall, I thought it was a great tune. My favorite song on that album. Oh man, it's a tough call, but I think it's probably Still Take Me, and I didn't really realize what those lyrics meant.
Yeah.
As an 8 or that album came out 76. I think I was 8 years old when that album came out. I don't really know what put your hands in my pocket and grab onto my rock.
Yeah, but it's funny because even as a young kid, I hung onto that lyric, and it's like I didn't even know what it meant, but it just sounded like a great rock lyric. It's something about those words, just even not knowing what it meant at the time, it was just said, man, those are great lyrics.
Oh yeah, dude, those guys are amazing. So
I mean, that's a Paul lyric. It's only something he could come up with. But I will tell you another song. There's really not a bad song on there, but another song I really always dug on there, probably my favorite, if you can believe it, is Mr. Speed. And again, another great Paul tune, but it's one of those tunes that really got buried, and I was surprised they never played it live, or it wasn't a bigger hit, but that's one of those tracks that kind of got lost.
Oh, I always thought that was a fantastic tune. There's actually a band out of the Midwest, a KISS cover band, or a KISS tribute band, excuse me, I used the correct
I know who you're talking about. I've interviewed the singer Rich Kosick a few times. Wow, yeah. Great. They're probably like the premier tribute to KISS.
I've met their drummer once. His name is Quentin Kufal. He did a show out here with a band called Huguenin. That dude, wow, what a player. And he really does, from what I've seen, like on their videos and whatnot on YouTube, he really does a great job with the Peter Criss character. So.
And what's amazing about Mr. Speed, yeah, you're right, they're out of Cleveland, I believe, and they've been doing it for over 20 years. So a tribute band that's been together that long, I mean, KISS itself is 50 years at least. So that's pretty amazing. But, so Rock and Roll Over, I think you've hit it on the nail. It's just a great kind of raw rock album with a little bit of an edge. But, just so many great. And then Peter Criss, I mean, it's featured a little more. He's got 2 tunes on here. I mean, Hard Luck Woman, again, that's a Paul Stanley tune that he wrote. I don't even know if it was originally for Peter in mind. Originally, Paul wanted to, from what I understand, write a song along the lines of Maggie May, which he thought Hard Luck Woman kind of reminded him of. He wanted Rod Stewart to do it, but Rod turned it down, so they did it.
Mm-hmm, exactly right. And it's a great tune, and, that song, when you listen to Peter Criss does have that same kind of Rod Stewart vibe to his voice. And you can totally hear Rod Stewart singing that song. So, kudos to, Paul Stanley for even thinking that. I think it really is, it's a staple for KISS. It's a great KISS song. It's a memorable song.
Yeah.
And it fits them better than it would have fit Rod Stewart. So good for them. Glad he turned it down.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Hard Luck Woman is it's almost got like a kind of a country rock appeal to it. I mean, it's not totally a rock song. It's not quite a country song, but it's one of those tunes that kind of could have crossed over. And that's why people that are like into hard rock, people who are just kind of the more popular stuff KISS did, there was a little something on there for everybody.
Mm-hmm. The bass line of that song is really what kind of gives it that country feel.
Yeah.
When you listen to the bass line, it kind of really lends itself to a country vibe.
Yeah, and I always thought, this could just be me, but I've heard a lot of people say this too. I always thought that Peter Criss was almost a better singer than he was a drummer. Now, you go back to those early KISS albums, like especially the first one, I mean, he was really young. I mean, he was older than the other guys at the time, but, he's a lot younger than he is now. And he still kind of had a little bit passion to what he was playing on those earlier albums. I mean, you listen to all that stuff on the first album, you go to Hotter Than Hell, like Strange Ways. I mean, the guy was on fire, but, he's been playing for so long that, I mean, he's 75 or something like that now, and he's suffering from carpal tunnel. That's why I guess he's not playing anymore. But he lived his life for rock and roll, I guess you could say.
Yeah, one could definitely say that. And I have to agree. I kind of like Peter's vocal style more than his drum style. I think he came from more like a jazz background, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's what he kind of brought to the band, I understand.
which kind of, when you think about it, it lends itself or leads it into the next album I guess we're going to talk about, which is Creatures of the Night and Eric Carr.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, Eric Carr is one of my favorite drummers of all time, if not my favorite drummer.
Oh, yeah.
He brought so much to the band, and he actually changed their sound. And he was just as good a singer, to me, as Peter Criss. To me, I think, without being too, I think Peter Criss is amazing. He's an original member of the band.
Yeah.
I think Eric Carr kind of elevated their play a little bit. And I think when they finally did the album with Creatures of the Night, I think it raised expectations again for the band to more or less take their rightful place among the top hard rock / metal bands instead of being the pop rock band that they were becoming.
Oh, yeah.
Through some of my lesser, my least favorite albums, which were Dynasty and Unmasked. I actually do like The Elder. I think The Elder has some really, really high moments on it. Not that the other ones don't either.
Yeah, well, Mike, that's a conversation I'd like to have with you another time about The Elder, because if you check, I just posted an interview I did with this guy named Jason Lee Beckwith. He plays out here in a Los Angeles tribute band called Kissed Alive, and we were talking about the fact that this is the 40th anniversary of The Elder, if you could believe that, 2021. I mean, can you believe that album's that old?
It tells me how old I am.
Yeah, but kind of moving into the next album, Creatures of the Night, that's a good place to do that, because could you imagine being Eric Carr and you get to join this legendary band, and first album with them is The Elder, and from what I understand, Eric's favorite album of all the albums he did with Kiss was actually Creatures of the Night. That's the one he kind of told everybody, yeah, that's my favorite album that I've done with the band, and even up until right before he died, that was always his favorite album that he recorded with the band. And like you said, after those other albums, Kiss finally returned kind of to a hard rock metal sound, more leaning towards metal. It was now the 80s. They've now survived, Ace and Peter both leaving, being out of the band. Now, my question to you is, when Creatures of the Night first came out, it was originally released with the blue album cover we all know and love, and it features Ace on the cover, even though he does not play a lick on the album. When you found out all these years later Ace didn't play on the album, what were your thoughts?
Well, when that album came out, it came out in 1982.
Yeah.
In 1982, I was 14 years old. I think I might have been playing guitar at that time for anywhere between, 9 or 10 months, maybe up to a year. I didn't really have the ear to notice, and when you look back at like Rock and Roll Over and these other albums, they also didn't feature Ace all the time either.
Yeah.
Like for instance, Kiss Alive 2, side 4 is basically Bob Julick.
Yeah, and that's another thing though, was kept kind of a secret even up until the early 90s, and it was only once Gene kind of let it out in an interview he did, and he told Bob, "Oh sure, if you want to talk about all the Kiss albums you played on, go ahead, you can do it now, Bob." But up until that point, nobody had really known. They kept it under wraps for many years. I was just amazed, music industry being what it is, that they were able to keep that so under wraps all those years.
Yeah, that's just different time, different era. But when it came to finding out that, it was a lot of Vinnie Vincent on Creatures of the Night, and in retrospect, I wasn't offended, I wasn't pissed, I didn't feel cheated, any of that stuff. If anything, when you finally find out that's Vinnie Vincent, in my mind, I was like, I can see that.
And it makes a little more sense because you think, the first time hearing Creatures, I mean, like I said, it's leaning a lot more towards metal than even hard rock. That's what was popular at the time, and they're trying to come back with a bigger and better sound. You never really heard Ace play anything that was really all that metal. So, now listening back to it, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, I can hear it. Maybe somebody else playing it.
Oh yeah, but to me, that album, and all these albums, they all have something in common. With it, whether it's Rock and Roll Over, Creatures of the Night, Lick It Up, Revenge. Aside from the Vinnie Vincent factor on the last three, they were all Kiss doing what they do best, which is just being Kiss. They weren't worried about following a trend. They weren't worrying about, like, Crazy Nights to me is basically Kiss's Bon Jovi album.
Yeah, in a way.
And this is just Kiss at their best. This is Kiss being hard. This is Kiss being unapologetic. And this is Kiss making an album that they want to make. They're not following a trend. And that's why all of these albums, to me, are probably a little bit more special than the rest of the Kiss album, because they just really have that it factor to them.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I mean, like, and these albums, they still really hold a special place as Kiss fans to us, because there is something special. I mean, Creatures of the Night especially, I mean, not that I didn't like the previous albums, but like, you know, like you said, Dynasty and Unmasked, they got a little more poppy, a little disco-y. Even The Elder, they're trying to be something they really weren't. And then
a prog band.
And then on Creatures, finally, they just say, you know what? Let's go back to just being Kiss. Let's do what we do best, you know? And that's why right out of the gates, releasing I Love It Loud as the first single. Oddly enough, okay, hey, it's a Gene tune. Gene's doing the lead vocal on the single, okay? That's something different, but I mean, right out of the back, they come out with a track that's just really rocking, and the video is pretty cool. It's like a live performance video of the band, and kind of like I even love the way, like, you know, the video starts off, you know, turning on the TV and you kind of see the video, and then it goes to like the live shot, and it's just like, and even, you know, that was really Kiss's early forte into video. I mean, MTV was new. I mean, even talking about The Elder for a minute, they had a video for World Without Heroes, but this is the first time Kiss is being seen in a real, like, kind of real metal way. MTV and I Love It Loud was played a lot more on MTV than A World Without Heroes, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, you know, going back to that metal sound that you mentioned, to me, when I listen to the drum sound that Michael James Jackson was able to achieve with Eric Carr on this album, it that drum sound, more or less, when you think about it, set the tone for the 1980s hard rock drum sound. And it really kind of established Eric Carr in the world of credibility with drummers.
And Kiss is, like I said, people always say, you know, Kiss, I hear a lot of people say, Kiss, you know, they're not the world's greatest musicians. And, you know, maybe so, but I'll tell you what Kiss has had, you know, that's given them their staying power, especially Gene and Paul. They're really great songwriters. I mean, these are songs being played 50 years later on the radio still, all these Kiss songs that we grew up on. And it doesn't matter if it's I Love It Loud, you know, Unholy, Rock and Roll All Night. I mean, they've got great hooks, songs that you remember to this day. So they're, you know, and, you know, so you can't really just say Kiss made it alone on the makeup and the look. They had talented songwriters, and the songs are pretty good, you know?
Well, that's the thing, is most people, when they look at, like, say, for instance, a guitar player, they're worried about, you know, can this guy, quote unquote, shred?
Yeah.
You know, when someone, and I don't view myself, for instance, as a shredder. When people say, "Oh, dude, you can shred," I just say thank you.
Yeah.
Because I don't view myself that way. To me, it's much more important to be able to write a good song, write and arrange a good song, and one that is memorable, one that people will sing when your album's not playing and it's just stuck in their head.
Yeah.
That's what Gene and Paul can do. These guys are ace songwriters. They're among the best, and they don't get enough credit for that. And one thing people don't, you know, remember is that a song doesn't have to be intricate. It doesn't have to have all of these little things where you're like, oh, wow, I really love their musicianship there. All the song has to do is convey feeling and relate to an audience, and that's what their songs do. Those guys are killer songwriters. And
maybe you can relate to this as a musician, you know, being a guitar player yourself, but I think you're the type of musician too, like you're saying. Although you may have the ability to shred on the guitar, if you're going to do that, it's got to kind of fit the song or fit what you're doing. I mean,
absolutely.
Like a good example, Vinnie Vincent's a great example of that. I mean, the guy can shred the best of them, and he was one of those guys that, like, maybe he overplayed a little, you know, if you know what I mean. I mean, like I read in Paul's book that, like, on the Lick It Up tour, there's Paul talks about, you know, being on stage and Vinny's just kind of overplaying, trying to overshadow everybody, and Paul kind of gives him a dirty look and just tells him, "Man, you ever do that again? Trying to showcase me on stage? That's not what it's about." And then, like, if you look at the first Invasion album that Vinny put out, his first solo effort after leaving Kiss, I love that album. It's a lot of flashy guitar playing, and one of my favorite songs on there is like the song "Twisted," and yeah, it's shredding and overplaying, but it fit the song. But then to do that on every single thing you do, like he's got an album I just seen it on YouTube called Speed Jam, where the whole album is just like one track that just never ends, and I'm like kind of like what's the point of that? But so he's got the ability to shred, but I think he's overplayed in a way, and he doesn't really. And it's interesting because he's a great songwriter too. I mean, I've heard a ton of unreleased songs. These great demos he's written and recorded over the years that never got released. But he's a great songwriter. But I just could never figure out why he could not release the stuff. It sounds so great, but he wants to release just shredding stuff.
Well, I agree with you in the fact that I think he's an amazing songwriter. When you listen to the songs that he put on the Kiss albums, when you listen to the songs that he's released on his own, I think they're all magnificent. And Vinny's probably one of my favorite players.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, and I'm at odds with some of my guitar playing friends about this, I do think that, yes, he probably did overplay on a little bit of the, on the Invasion album and the All Systems Go albums, but I think it also fit. For whatever reason, It fit. But I could see, like, for instance, a song like No Substitute. I know we're getting off track.
No, that's fine. That's fine, because Vinny's part of the Kiss story,
But, a song like No Substitute, you could play, a melody similar to what he played in those solos and just less notes. And to me, it would have conveyed a little bit more feeling, and it probably would have brought the song home a lot more to a greater audience. But Vinny was also probably in a different place at that time, really needing to showcase and show what he could do for whatever reason.
Yeah, and we could get into this later, but I got to tell you, of the two Vinnie Vincent albums, I probably like the first one the best. And it's kind of interesting because Mark Slaughter is a great singer, but I don't know that I don't want to say he didn't fit the band, but I liked what he did with Slaughter a lot better than I liked that Vinnie Vincent album. But I love the first Invasion album. I'll just leave it at that.
No, I understand. I'm a big fan of Robert Fleischman's voice, and I think Mark Slaughter's a spectacular singer.
Yeah.
For what I've heard from a lot of people, he's kind of like honestly, like a couple of the singers. It's like you either really love his style of singing or you don't. To me, I've always dug Mark Slaughter, but I really like Robert Fleischman.
Maybe that's what it is with me, because the debut album, and then there was this other one he put out, like an 4-song EP, Euphoria, with Robert Fleischman. It just reminded me so much of what was on the first album, and maybe I'm kind of biased to Robert Fleischman. I don't know, but him and Vinny seem to have a great chemistry.
Yeah. So, what are your favorite songs on the Creatures of the Night album?
Well, okay, I want to get into that now. I Love It Loud is always, because like I said, I love a lot of what Gene does in the band, and that's just a great kind of metal hard rock tune. I think it was a perfect song to kind of for Kiss's comeback at the time. Try to bring Kiss back in a big way. I kind of like it all, but I will tell you, here's an interesting thing I just recently learned. Bryan Adams, as you know, he's a co-writer. Bryan Adams, of all people, co-wrote War Machine. Okay.
War Machine, yeah.
And I just can't believe a guy like that wrote this great metal tune for Kiss, but it works, and he deserves to be credited with that, because he's a writer. And other interesting thing I think is, I don't know if he was one of the writers also on the song Rock and Roll Hell, but I just found out recently that before Kiss ever, I thought that was a Kiss tune, but apparently somebody else wrote it, and before Kiss ever recorded Rock and Roll Hell, it was previously recorded by Bachman, Turner, and Overdrive.
Oh wow!
Yeah, yes.
Wow,
and I heard that for the first time going on YouTube because somebody told me about this, and I thought, wow, doesn't really sound like the Kiss version, but hey, this is kind of interesting to go back and hear that. And of course the title track I always loved. Danger. What was it? Saint and Sinner. I always loved that. Really, and then I Still Love You, I think, was kind of a standout track too, because it was the closest we got to a ballad on there, and it's like, of all the songs on the album, that's probably the most different of all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, I think you just hit one of the songs for me was "I Still Love You." To me, that's been a spectacular song. It's something a little bit different, and it really kind of it almost seemed like it was, when you listen to it, it almost seemed to me like it could have been a holdover from The Elder. I know it wasn't.
Yeah.
It sure sounded like it. And to me, I think the other two songs that everybody loves, "I Love It Loud," but I think "Keep Me Coming" was one of my biggest favorites.
Oh, that's one I forgot about. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Had a really cool vibe to it. But "Creatures of the Night" was just something that came out and just grabbed you.
And of everything Kiss has done, that's the most different, I think, really track they've ever. I mean, they've done a lot of different stuff, but I mean, it almost sounds like like you could just imagine somebody jumping out at you at night when you're walking down the street, scaring you to death, but just like being terrified. But it was just such a different tune.
And when you finally, before we move on to Lick It Up, I want to end with this and just say, when you have an opportunity, check out on YouTube. There's a band that I'm sure you know of called Brighton Rock. Greg Fraser, Gerald McGee. Right?
Okay.
They actually did a cover of "Creatures of the Night," and they rearranged it, and it's very, very cool.
I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware of that. But the other thing that we got to talk about Creatures before we can end it on this is, like I said, originally was released with the blue cover, and then I do not know why, in an attempt maybe by a record company to kind of cash in on it. In 1985, when Bruce Kulick joined the band, they had just put out Asylum. And then shortly after they re-released Creatures of the Night with the band now in non-makeup. Bruce is on the cover again. So when, didn't play a lick, like Ace didn't play a lick on the album, and he's featured on the album cover. I don't know if it sold a lot more, but eventually there was such a demand by the Kiss fans to, hey, we want the original cover, that now you can only get it with the original cover, which I think is a cool thing. But if you have other cover with Bruce, it's, I guess, kind of a collector's thing. But kind of interesting that they did that.
Well, I had it on vinyl. I don't have it anymore.
Uh-huh.
I had all my vinyl got wiped out a long, long time ago.
Wow.
In an office flood at my father's old office.
Wow.
So that is what it is. It's where I was storing the stuff, but it was kind of cool to have. It was one of those things. As a Kiss fan, you're like, oh, gee, it's the same album, and Kiss kind of got us with a lot. It's like, but I need to keep it in my collection because it's another, So you go out and you buy it even though you don't need to. But I had them both.
Interesting. And now, moving on to Lick It Up now. Lick It Up was kind of, it was like the next step up from Creatures, in the sense that, okay, you like what we did on Creatures, we're going to get even more kind of metal with Lick It Up. And
let's give you more of the same, but let's take off our makeup.
Yeah. And that was very interesting too. Now, I don't know if it's true, but apparently they had originally shot the cover with them in makeup, and then somebody had the idea, I think it was Paul, you know what, let's see what we look like without the makeup. Let's see what it would look like to shoot a cover. And then they kind of went with the final choice. And then I think the other thing with Lick It Up is Vinny had toured with them on Creatures. He's now a full-fledged member of the band. Okay, this guy's profile, it's going to be raised up a little more, in the sense that he was a co-writer on 8 of the tunes, so very much involved in the album, a lot more than he was on Creatures. Or at least, a lot more people knew about it. We'll put it like that.
Right.
Yeah. So, what was your initial response when you seen Kiss without makeup for the first time? I mean, did you see them on the album cover first, or did you see them unmasking on MTV?
I saw it on MTV. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I couldn't wait for that. That was like the most anticipated event, I think, of my short lifetime.
Yeah.
And what was his name? Triple J was the MTVJ.
Yeah.
His name? I can't remember his name right now, but he was the VJ that was there that unmasked Kiss.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, dude, it was a blast. It was just so amazing. And I just remember sitting there and being in complete awe, but also wishing that it was like Ace Frehley that was part of that, so you could see Ace. And very shortly after, you saw Ace anyway.
Yeah.
But, it was amazing. And then when the album came out and you heard, just that the guitar notes of Exciter, I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
And, it did not disappoint. It was so, you listen to an Exciter, not for the innocent. It's just so metal. Then they come out with, Lick It Up, which was kind of, the song itself was a little bit more power pop oriented, so to speak. But, what a great album.
But again, not just album. With Lick It Up, it's song. You didn't just have the song and the video being played all over on TV, but it was played all over radio, back then.
Everywhere.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, Kiss was finally kind of, back in the 70s, Kiss was played all the time on the radio, but for a while they weren't being played as much on the radio. But Lick It Up was kind of their comeback with that, and all of a sudden they were back on the radio. You're seeing the video on MTV, and then, like you said, you see Unmasking. And I remember when they did the Unmasking, it's like, okay, yeah, I kind of could look at the guys before they even announced it and say, okay, that looks like Gene. And then, of course, when he sticks his tongue out, okay, yeah, that's Gene. And, okay, that guy's Paul.
Yeah.
And then, oh, that's what Eric looks like. That's what Vinny looks like. Okay.
Fantastic tour. I got to see them on that tour. The fun story is that, I was a young guy at the time. That was, 83? I think I was like 14 or 15. And I had 10th row seats at the Stanley Theater in Pittsburgh. And my father he did not trust, me and my 3 teenage friends.
Yeah.
For some reason or another, we were going to get into trouble at the show, or, someone was going to pick on us or whatever. So we went all the way from the 10th row, dead center, because he had to have a seat with us.
Wow.
We still had great seats, but we were back to the 27th row. And it was funny to watch that show with my father, who was, probably one of the penultimate jazz musicians of his time.
Wow.
And he was just like shaking his head the whole time, like, good God, I can't believe it. And he's looking at us and we're going crazy. And he's like, these kids just have no idea.
And then, And then,
what a show!
And the interesting thing about Lick It Up is it was too like another step up from Creatures in the sense that they were even going kind of more metal with the bulk of the album. I mean, it was a real metal sound. That's what was big at that time in 1983. And I think the difference with Lick It Up, it was not a case of Kiss was trying to follow the trends or anything. It's just they had taken off the makeup and they were not necessarily trying to fit in, but they were embracing more. I would say they're more embracing what was popular at the time. But they made it work because they weren't doing it just, oh, well, the last album didn't sell, we're going to do what everyone else is doing. It was just more of kind of embracing it, and it seemed to work at the time,
Oh, absolutely. To me, like I said, when this album came out, it wasn't where they were following a trend. It's like, really, you guys, you like Creatures of the Night? Here, we're going to give you another album
like that, yeah.
Like that.
And when I say what the two albums have in common is Eric Carr, I mean, the drum sound got even bigger.
Well, yeah, it's the same band. Same producer. It's still Michael James Jackson.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, they had, I don't want to misspeak, so I won't go into it, but they really had some crazy way of achieving that drum sound. And they put him, I think, in like a basement or something like that, and where it's just like mad echo. And but that drum sound is, again, balls to the wall, badass, and you're probably never going to hear another drum sound like that ever again.
Yeah, I don't know whose idea it was, but I remember seeing Kiss on one of the later tours, and where Eric Carr, he did not sing on the album on Lick It Up, but they had Eric Carr sing lead on Young and Wasted. I thought, man, wow, what a great thing. Finally get to hear this guy, do what he can vocally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great drummer, great player. The 80s era of Kiss, Ty Sims and I, our producer for Steel City, he and I, we kind of get into it every now and again. He's like, there's a reason why 70s Kiss is better.
It's interesting because, I remember like when, just to mention, kind of get off topic for Crazy Nights, as you said, I remember, it's funny what, that sometimes you believe everything you hear. I remember at the time, like when Crazy Nights came out, I liked the title track. I liked the singles, Turn on the Night and Reason to Live. But, looking back now, like you said, it's much more of a poppy album. I remember at the time hearing Paul Stanley do all these interviews talking about, oh man, pick up the latest Kiss album, Crazy Nights, man. It's like Destroyer 2. And I was kind of a young teenager at the time, kind of buying everything that he was saying. I'm like, yeah, man. But now that I listen, no, it sounds nothing like Destroyer except for, it's Gene and Paul on it.
No, I'd have. I don't remember him saying that, but
yeah.
If I did hear it, I would vehemently disagree.
Yeah.
To me, the best song on Crazy Nights is Hell or High Water by far.
Oh, that's funny because that, as far as the Gene tunes, that was my favorite one on that album. That's one I don't know what it was. It's a catchy little tune, but I always kind of dug it.
But again, to me, when that album came out, it just seemed like they were just shifting to go with. Again, that's when, to me, they were kind of shifting to go with what was popular. To me, Creatures of the Night and Get Up were not. They weren't shifting to go with what's popular. They were just going with.
Even image-wise, they were starting to glam out a little more,
Oh my gosh! By Asylum, they were full on glam. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, but and then All Hell's Breaking Loose. That was kind of a different tune, kind of a
that
rap tune.
Somewhat following a trend because rap was kind of becoming big, and they had their little rap tune.
And I don't know if they wrote it first or what, but I think Paul Stanley, being Paul Stanley, I think, like you said, it was probably the time he just wanted to kind of, hey, I wonder if I could come up with a little rap tune, and it was able to work for him. I mean, it was one of the more popular tunes on there, so that's kind of interesting. And then I do think it's kind of, everybody thought Kiss was going to be over when they took off the makeup, and it's like, oh, and then Paul kind of was like, well, okay, I think we proved that we can do this without the makeup, and they carried on like that for a few more years,
Paul just came out and said, you think we're done? We got something for you.
Yeah. And so they really made a statement, with that album as far as that. And, jumping ahead to Revenge, it's kind of funny because I think what made Revenge so great is, what predated the album is God Gave Rock and Roll to You. That was in that Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack. And they got back together with Bob Ezrin, and Bob Ezrin was off the drugs. He back to the magical Bob Ezrin stuff, and it sounded like classic Kiss. You heard that tune, that's what everybody thought. And I guess Gene and Paul thought, hey, let's try getting back with Bob to do an album. And what makes Revenge so great, Paul and Gene went back to writing together. If you listen to half the tunes on the album, they co-sing, and that's when Kiss was at its best.
To me, best Kiss album of all time.
Yeah.
Without question. You don't know what made the stars align for that to happen, whether it's just, Ezrin coming back, being clean, or, them writing together, having Vinnie Vincent come in and write some songs with them. The production was top shelf, the tone was killer. The songs were all just fantastic.
Well, it's kind of interesting because that was, they just suffered the loss with Eric Carr, so I don't know if that made them kind of, work a little harder, want to come back, with a bigger, better sounding album. But they kind of worked through their grief with that. And then I'm sure that the Car Jam that they include on there, that's part of the song Breakout that Ace Frehley does on the Frehley. And and then Bruce got to do his little solo over the original guitar track, which kind of is his final appearance with Eric, which is kind of cool in a way. And I think Vinnie Vincent, it was very interesting. That's when they got back with him, as you were saying, and he wrote like some of the big hits off that album. And like I said, it's a miracle that Vinnie is a great writer, but he's got other issues, I guess, that get in his way.
And that's been hey man, I don't know the guy.
No.
For certain, I'd love to meet him, but that's what they say is that he's just always been not one of those guys that just can't seem to get out of his own way. Whenever things start going well for him, he just seemingly takes a turn for the worse and just shoots himself in the foot. Whatever reason, I don't know, but you can't deny the guy's talent.
Oh no.
To me, he's an unreal guitar player. He's an even better songwriter.
Yeah.
And I've always loved his songwriting. And like I said, for me, songwriting is where it starts and ends. The guitar solo, for any guitar player out there, if the guitar solo is the only thing you worry about.
Yeah.
You need some couch time, because that's not what really makes the song go. What makes the song go is the melody, and that's what a lot of people need to remember. Vinny, for as much as he quote unquote overplays, he remembers to write a really memorable melody before he does any of that.
Yeah, and the songs he co-wrote on Revenge, they're like the best tunes on the album. I mean,
oh man, Unholy. Oh my gosh,
Heart of Chrome.
Is just
unreal. I Just Wanna. I mean, even in I Just Wanna, I love that little section of the song where they kind of all sing together. It kind of sounds like Queen a little bit, and then it kind of really picks up. And Unholy. That reminds me. I got to say that whole album is like a cross between Creatures and Destroyer. I mean, it really, especially Unholy, it kind of is a little more heavier edge than like I Love It Loud, but it's kind of got that feel. Gene is singing it, much like when Creatures came out, the first single, the Gene tune. I thought, man, this is return to the classic Kiss,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally was, and they just had that. Everybody was going heavier again.
Yeah.
They were returning back to getting out of the glam, going back to that heavier look and sound. And I think a lot of that, as much as I'm probably not a true fan of the band, a lot of that had to do with Guns N' Roses, because they kind of put the world on its ear when they came out with Appetite in '86, because they didn't have that complete glam look. They were more guttural,
from the street, raw. From the street.
And when they came out, you started to see bands shift to that. And by 1990, 91, 92, it seemed like they were really just making a full-on return to being, rock and roll.
And not
hard rock.
Not just sound-wise, but, with Revenge, if you look at any of the photos from that era, I mean, they had much more of a metal look, kind of...
exactly.
Gene had a beard and wearing the metal and chains and stuff, trying to go for more of a heavier look. And then they even have four singles and videos from that album. And I will say this: a track on there that I always loved, that I was kind of surprised that it wasn't a bigger hit, was Every Time I Look at You. Now I think that would come out like on an earlier Kiss album, it would have been a much bigger hit. Just different time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you wonder. I don't know when they wrote that song, but because it's by Stanley and Ezrin.
Yeah.
But every time you never know. It's like, was that a song that Paul and Bob wrote like 10 years before, 15 years before, and they find it on a spot, or did they write it in the studio? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems like if they could have released that on an earlier album, that song probably would have been bigger.
And and the only thing that really surprised me about Revenge is, they have this big comeback with Revenge as far as the album, and people were just loving it. People even to this day point to that as one of their favorite Kiss albums, especially from the Bruce Kulick era. I know Bruce says that's his favorite album he ever did with the band, and rightfully so. But I was surprised when they had that kind of success with Revenge, that they would go and do like a 180 on the next studio album, even though it took like 5 years for it to come out. Carnival of Souls, great album in its own right, but you would think with that kind of success you'd go and want to do another album like Revenge, or in that vein, or hey, let's stick with Ezrin. We had such a huge successful last album. Let's try to repeat that. You have to remember the times. Yeah.
And you had every band, like for instance, not to change the subject of Kiss, but look at Warrant.
Yeah.
Doggy Dog is probably one of my favorite Warrant albums of all time. I mean, that is just one stellar album. It's heavy. It had a really nice. It was dark. It punched you in the face.
Oh yeah.
But it didn't matter what Warrant was going to do in 1993 or 1994, whenever Ultraphobic came out, was just a completely different sound. Because all of these bands, whether it's Kiss, whether it's Warrant, whether it's Winger, it doesn't matter. None of them were being the credit for being the good musicians that they were and playing the style of music that they were. So it's all about quote unquote grunge at that point. And there had been a shift in the music industry towards that. So Kiss was, I don't want to say they were not. I don't want to say they were following a trend, but that's just kind of where the music was headed.
Kind of their attempt at let's see if we can do a grunge album,
I don't even know if it's let's see if we can do a grunge album. It's just like if we release it under Revenge, it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
And I think that all of these bands were thinking that way, because they were all just. It's a shame to say it, but they were all kind of thrown out like they were yesterday's trash when Nirvana hit. And to me, I like some of that 90s music as well. There were some really great songs by Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and other bands like that, and there's some garbage out there too.
Yeah.
But, those bands were what were becoming popular because people were looking for something different, and that was it at the time. Yeah. And sadly, bands like Kiss, bands like Def Leppard, bands like weren't afforded the same opportunity to create those albums as these new bands were.
Very interesting perspective, Mike. And it's interesting you bring up Warren, because I know you mentioned the album Dog Eat Dog, and I heard Janie Lane say how that was his favorite Warren album that he had done with the band. Now, of course, as you know, a lot of us Warren fans love those first two Warren albums. Got all the hits on, and it's interesting. Even though Janie Lane is no longer with us, his family has allowed the band to carry on with Robert Mason, and they can do, no matter how many great songs they put out with Robert Mason, as great of a singer, the bulk of the stuff they perform in concert of a Janie Lane song. I mean, all those, and I guess the family kind of allows them to, so the Warren fans can hear those tunes, go out and play those tunes. But it's the reason people come to still see Warren. Sadly, Janie's no longer with us. Robert does a great job of performing those tunes, but those are the tunes all those Warren fans want to hear. The Janie Lane songs.
Well, and there's a reason for that. And but to me, honestly, my favorite song by Warren is a song that Robert wrote, and it's called Dusty's Revenge.
Oh, okay.
And I'm an absolute, I love Janie Lane. When I write vocals, when I write songs, 9 times out of 10, he's the voice that I hear in my head.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that tells you as big a fan of the man as I am.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you.
Again.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Mike, for taking time talking to me. I really enjoyed doing this again. If you could.